Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this month's Grid Talk. Delighted to be joined by Adam, and today we're going to be talking about Navigate. Adam, do you want to do a quick intro for everyone?
Yeah, hi, my name's Adam Robson. Work for Network Rail, the North West and Central region. I'm part of the governance and assurance team.
Cool. And then for those that don't know me, I'm Pip Morpeth. I'm the CEO of MethodGrid. Right. For those new to Grid Talk, it's just something we run monthly. It's just really about sharing best practice, some of the things that we do in sort of R&D and research as well. And then if you're very new to MethodGrid, we are a SaaS business that built a platform that allows you to connect knowledge, process, and delivery for your teams. That's pretty much it, really, for MethodGrid. And so for today's subject, it's about Navigate. And so we just thought 3 simple points. We're going to sort of talk about the challenge that Network Rail were facing with Navigate. Then we'll focus on, okay, what did it take to kind of bring it to life? And then, yeah, Adam, I don't mind if you share just maybe some of the outcomes and kind of lessons learned. So let me kick off. Adam, do you want to set the scene, a bit of context about and the background, kind of how Navigate came about?
Yeah, so I guess the challenge was that we had training material, policies, procedures, governance and assurance checklists, etc., located in numerous locations for the commercial department for post-contract delivery, and they were in SharePoint sites, different training platforms, etc. Not that there's anything against SharePoint sites, etc., but holistically we wanted to bring all of that together, primarily because of new starters and restructuring of the business, so that you could bring a new person into the team and they would have one location to go to kind of self-serve, understand all the process, the procedure, the governance, the assurance, and also be able to train in one location. And I guess, yeah, so that was the challenge. And so that's how we found our way into looking at MethodGrid. But I think it was an easy sell because you'd done work previously in the business on another playbook called Pace, which is kind of a project management gateway product. And so once we'd seen that, the idea sparked that, wow, maybe we could use this for post-contract delivery. So it was an easy sell because we could see it functioning in another area of the business, and we kind of used our imagination to say, yeah, that can work there.
And the scope of Navigate, is that mainly it's built around NEC? It's the kind of shift from ICE to NEC contracting as well.
Yeah, so that's a good nuance. So we recently changed our standard form of contract from the ICC to the NEC4 based on the government construction playbook recommendations. And so there was a shift contractually to how we were going to deliver contracts. But that wasn't just the whole purpose of Navigate. The whole purpose of Navigate was to do with all things that were post-contract. And when I say post-contract delivery, I mean the contract's been signed, it's been agreed, both parties have signed up to it, and then you're going to deliver it. So when I say post-contract, that's the playbook that we that we did create.
I suppose, Adam, then, from your perspective, what were the kind of key challenges people were actually facing, with that process in operations?
So part of the challenge or the problem, I guess, was that people were finding it very hard to locate one source of the truth. We had numerous different work areas and different departments that were functioning. They were functioning and things were going well, but it was very SharePoint based, and if someone left, you then had to reintroduce them to, or new starters, had to be reintroduced to a whole web or matrix, if you like, of file locations and how to find things. And that's obviously very slow to get up to start and coming as an active member of the team. So that was kind of the biggest problem, really, is finding a single source of the truth without having to really know and understand bespoke work patterns and areas spread across the region. So that that was the problem people were facing, and that's what our hopes were, to bring that together under this playbook.
I think it's, we call it kind of the cognitive load problem, is people have to kind of build that mental picture where everything is in terms to kind of work out what the kind of next step is. And I suppose in the reality, sometimes we haven't kind of got everything in place. Yeah, I think sometimes when we do the kind of process to playbook shift, what we also find is, we actually haven't got anything about that process anywhere. Yeah.
And there was some of that, and you only see that when it's in one location, really, don't you? Because the gap analysis happens when you can see it all in one place, and you can see the bits that you need to fill in, which is why the grid system works so well, because you can physically see a tile that you don't have, or a step that isn't there, that you need to create. So that was quite good. And likewise for the training, I think it was easy to create training videos that could be embedded into that grid once you'd seen it in one location and had that opportunity to see it. But you're quite right. Actually, another benefit or a problem that happened prior to the development of the grid is we would see people creating reports, for example, that were duplicates of other reports when they could have just used a report from another work area, for example. So there's this duplication of information going on. And so you think, you're doing good work, but actually the work's already been done if you just know where to find it and where to be signposted to it. You don't have to create your own report. You don't have to create your own Power BI. There's a link there to one that's already been done. There's a classic example there.
Yeah, I think there's two things that happen in life in ways of working. One, there's kind of misinterpretation, like people just misinterpret, or they just can't find it, and they get into the habit of, I've used this elsewhere, or I'll reinvent the wheel. And it's kind of, you maybe met the requirement, but I think you're still constantly trying to help people be more consistent, but also try and make your ways of working actually used, rather than just gathering dust on a shelf and trying to reinforce the behavior. Is, don't reinvent, please. Just try and, here's the template, here's the best practice examples that you can use to help you get it done. I don't know. Well, actually, why don't we're talking about Navigate. Let me just share my screen and we'll just give people a quick run through of Navigate. She's over here. So this is Navigate. So this is the kind of playbook that sort of walks people through the kind of left to right. So you've got kind of initiation, contract setup, all the way contract delivery, contract closeout. I'll just go slowly, and then you have your stage gates, or your gate boundaries, which kind of give people guidance on the kind of process and approval steps through each gate. And then I think, was it governance? This kind of concept where I'm not trying to overwhelm people, but very clearly, you've got different themes that kind of make it more logical. And then when you come to explaining people what you need to do, you can click on here, give people that the method grid concept is, okay, I'm giving you the knowledge, all the information you need when you need it, so that they can actually have half a chance of trying to get it done correctly. So the description, how it fits in with the life cycle. You can then put in the templates, guidance around the standards, etc., to give people all of that information.
I think one really handy thing as well is the labeling function on the grid. So one of the challenges we had is, well, what do you do if you've got a whole region of different work areas that are operating on different contract forms and have different delivery profiles, but they loosely follow the same grid, but some of the elements aren't applicable to them? And that's where we developed this idea of profiles, and I'm probably butchering the terminology, but the way that you could basically filter out elements that weren't relevant to different work areas, so it becomes more bespoke, it's more intimate, and you kind of can operate around that. So that was one really helpful function, because it's very difficult, I guess, to land something when people say, "Oh, well, I'd have to read through all of this stuff. It doesn't concern me." Whereas actually, you do have that function there to make it bespoke, but you only have to do the work once and then select what applies to different work areas.
Yeah, I think that's probably, I mean, you can see the labels there that then dynamically will display what elements are relevant to you. I think that's probably the dynamic that we find. If I try to build that logic in a process diagram, you know, if you had to give it a go, you'd end up with like, is it this, is it that, you know,
Yeah.
multiple kind of boxes. And it's kind of like, well, actually, that's not really helpful. And I'd be amazed if you could ever like process map the kind of left to right of what is quite a complex process when you get into kind of project delivery, because really a lot of the information that you receive at each stage that's going backwards and forwards, actually it's really about the human in the loop interface to kind of then work out, okay, well, what steps do we think is the best approach? But rather than have that scattered, that knowledge scattered everywhere, it's kind of like, well, actually, look, you know, there are some key deliverables, outputs that you need to produce at each stage, and these are some key decisions you need to think about. But I think making the playbook have the ability to react to that environment or those scenarios is really what's key, because I think what we're finding with playbooks is actually they're becoming more and more dynamic. And I think really static content or static knowledge is really not helping people out when a lot of their world they're facing is becoming much more dynamic. And as you get more information, it's kind of, well, what do you do with that information, and what's the best path through it?
Yeah, I think the way that we delegated ownership from a kind of racy perspective was quite important as well. So probably jumping ahead when we got to the embedment stage, but what was important is that you could kind of give ownership within the business to some of this information. And so there are experts in the business, for example, engineers that will understand processes far better than a commercial manager would. And you'd actually be able to say, well, here's your tiles in the grid. If anything changes, they're now your responsibility, but you're the subject matter expert for that area. And that was also a good evolution of, instead of people like, you know, hoarding control over documents that are stored in a department, it could all be on one sheet and you could physically see, oh, there's an update there, and the engineers take care of that, or they're responsible for the information that goes into that tile. So there's this collaborative element going on, which is hard to do, as you say, with flowcharts on a sheet.
Yeah, I think when you we found that when we do the kind of process to playbook like design, and you bring everyone together, normally it's kind of a epiphany moment. It's like, oh, actually, yeah, we need this here, we need that there, and for the first time for some, it's kind of actually brought a lot more clarity or helped improve kind of cross-functional collaboration between different functions or different practices that you've got. But I think the other very simple one, so I think it's on every element we build, is who's the expert that you can go and speak to.
Yeah.
And some, you know, it's a very simple thing, but okay, if I've never done one of these things before, or it's been 5 years since I've, I don't know, been in this type of situation, who do I go to? And rather than, oh, it's kind of email and chasing down, or teams trying to figure it out, it's nice just to be, well, look, these are the 3 experts in the firm that, or the organization that you can kind of go and speak to get that kind of clarity. And, you know, knowledge is obviously written stuff and the kind of video explainers and the e-learning that you can embed in the platform. But I think, you know, it can be as simple as, what's the human network in the organization that can actually help me solve that problem?
I also think from a project accountability and delivery perspective, it really helped understand, definitely when we were building it, and I think, and I do believe as the teams go on to use it, it will help. But to understand the accountability and responsibilities of each department on a project. So coming back to that assignment of who owns what information and which stage of the project, that was really helpful, because as you say, as you start to map that out, you start to realize it isn't always common knowledge who is responsible for which part of a process.
Yeah, no, it's assumed. Yeah, I think people make it, again, it's just a misinterpretation. And again, it just impacts productivity, because, you know, you can spend half your time, well, who's doing what here, and trying to find out where that information exists. Worst times, it's kind of, it just lives in people's heads, and it's kind of, that's the worst type, because that can change. Was there anything sort of that made you realize around that something needed to change, or was it just more about the focus on just clarity and consistency?
I think it was the focus was the two parts. The first part was that we had a lot of people coming to us saying they can't find relevant documents, and we know they're there. They were just hard to map the people. And and then the second part of it was taking quite a long time for new starters to get up to speed. And we thought, well, what's the solution to that? Is have a system where a line manager can say, here's the stuff you need. There's also little videos on there that can point you to actually explain, like video explainers of how to fill things out and do things. And so it took the load off the mid-level managers and the senior leaders to do that in quite a complex environment. The rail industry is quite bespoke, and it has its own quirky ways, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of knowledge that you can only pick up once you're actually inside of the organization and doing things. And I think that was what we tried to highlight with Navigate as a grid is, we're going to try and make that process easier. So you can come in and you maybe know nothing about the rail industry from a commercial perspective, but you can sit in front of this thing and it's going to help you and guide you and train you and get you up to speed. So basically it was a training function as well as a one source of truth function kind of located together.
Yeah, I think when we do implementations, I think we kind of advise clients is, look, actually, what you're actually building here is it's a development resource. It's part of your kind of learning and development to give people something that's structured around ways of working, rather than a kind of folder structure. It's kind of, look, you're in this stage, this is kind of what you need to focus on. So I think because you get a mix of different kinds of UI that you could apply. You could build it as a kind of folder structure, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then I think what we've just found is just laying it out, making the left to right very visible and very easy to understand, and then just, okay, well, where are you? I'm told I'm on contract setup. I'm in that stage. Okay, now you can then kind of focus on what's relevant for you and understand what everyone else is doing within that life cycle.
I think as well on that point, what's important for us as a large organization is that we listen to different learning styles, and we're inclusive of that. And I think MethodGrid does a good job of that. Sometimes getting lumbered with a large commercial handbook that's 700 pages long is not the best way to deliver information with people that learn in different ways, etc. And what I really liked about the grid system is, like I say, you can have a video explainer. You can also have the procedure itself. You can have snapshots, bullet points, key particulars from the documents, etc. So from a learning styles perspective, I think it's much more inclusive than just a document saying, here you go, read that. Yeah.
As well, I suppose it makes it easier to improve. I think, I probably described it a few times for people that I've spoken to before, but if I say, oh, you found a new way of working, or you've found a gap that you want to improve, it's kind of, well, the end state you really want to get to is, I can communicate it effectively and it gets adopted and introduced into ways of working. That's a bit easier if people are using the playbook to kind of guide them through the process. But also, if someone says, oh, well, just go and update the SharePoint or go and update the PDF that's already kind of, massive, you kind of probably just go, well, I could do, but I just don't think anyone, how am I going to effectively communicate it to people and actually get it used? And I think that's the bit where we're trying to make knowledge, like the process, much closer to delivery and to reflect the delivery environment itself. Mainly, as everyone wants, it's just to improve compliance and consistency, so that people don't need to reinvent the wheel or manage the misinterpret. It's just there. It's kind of when I need it, rather than scattered everywhere and I've got to spend 5-10 minutes trying to find it. I think the reality is, if it takes you more than 5 minutes to find, you'll probably just go and say, well, we'll just do it my way, or I do it like this on my last project. That's the kind of behavior you're trying to catch, really. Okay, I suppose then bringing Navigate to life, I suppose for someone new to that process to playbook journey, what was kind of different about the approach? Maybe what was the initial reaction from teams when they first saw it?
I think we were quite shocked, because we'd been told that it had this AI function, but we weren't entirely, like, I guess we thought, oh, it will be an assistant. It wouldn't be that much of a, game changer. And then once we actually started to upload documents into, with the help of MethodGrid and who was assigned to us, as we started to go through that process, we were quite like, wow, it really does know your documents. It really can pull together these tiles. And yeah, there's some tweaking that has to take place. But in general, we were quite shocked by the speed at which you can pull together quite vast amounts of information into something quite coherent on the tile, or an element, sorry. And so, yeah, that was the initial, we thought, oh, we're in for a long slog. And there was a lot of work. I don't want to tell people it isn't a lot of work to bring that together, but it's nowhere near as amount of work you're probably thinking in your head from traditional ways of working to bring all that information together. And so initial reactions were, we were quite surprised and amazed by the speed at which you can pull something together. I think a criticism of how we approached it, so I guess a bit of a, probably jumped ahead a bit on the lessons learned, but something that's important when you start the process is we were trying to aim for perfection without end user input, I think, a bit too much. And so you can really tweak these elements and you think, oh, they're amazing. And then you hand it over to the end user. And then there's going to be some tweaking as they report back to you as subject matter experts. And so I think the beauty of the grid actually is that you can get something that works and then try and get that embedded as quickly as possible so that you can then start to work with a pilot group or something like that to start to tweak it. Because I think we could have done that much sooner, but we were kind of like, oh, wow, we can make this amazing from the start. And actually, you don't need to do that with the system because it's so easy to update. You can get it out there to the end users. They can give you back all their wish list, if you like, and their pains and sorrows and things they don't agree with. And you can start that as a process really quickly because you've got that AI enablement to get a start for 10 to actually work with groups. So coming back to that point of the initial impression was we thought it was going to be a lot more difficult to get to that point than it was.
I have a difficulty selling it because I think I think most people for us to kind of codify ways of working, whether it's kind of your contracting life cycle or your project life cycle, when I say, oh, well, we'll probably be done in about 6 weeks, and they're like, they look at me, I'm like, yeah, because I think most people, they're like, oh, this could be 6-12 months, constant workshopping, and actually what we found is actually just lay out the life cycle, understand what the deliverables are, the controls you want. You might have some of it, you might not have any of it in terms of existing process procedural information, or it might be, good in some parts, bad in others, and gaps in the other. But very quickly we can understand and identify exactly where those pain points are. And then, we just source ground the AI model based on your kind of collateral to then start generating the content. And that is quite quick. And obviously we've evolved it to get smarter with kind of video explainers and e-learning kind of generation now. So to kind of translate sort of chaos into kind of a playbook is quite simple and quite quick these days, which is good.
On that point of the video explainers, that's a good point. That was something else that we were kind of very amazed by. The whole team were quite amazed by that. I mean, traditionally, we'd done some training videos in the past, very laborious. You filmed it, edited it, put subtitles in, transcripts, all that sort of stuff takes a long time. And then to see the use of how quickly you can pull together an AI generated training video that's actually pulling in elements of your own documents and links and where to find things, that was quite amazing. And then also how quickly it is to change a video if something changes, that was also very impressive. So there's two functions, if you've done it the old fashioned way with recording, you'd have to go back and then patch and edit in a different room, and it's a very laborious way of doing things. So that was really impressive.
Yeah, I think I was delighted when I saw that technology come forward. Because I take 20 of trying to get people together to try and be consistent, or to get the kind of quality you want. But you're right. like that knowledge, that video, that'll change. I think what a phenomenal example of AI is the kind of AI generated videos, but then yeah, okay, there's a new change, great, we just change the script, regenerate, and it's made available. And they're getting more and more interactive. I think we're sort of playing around with some of the ones that are doing scenarios. So a video that says, well, you now need to have some input, and so tell me if this happens or that happens, and the video becomes more dynamic. So yeah, no, it's great technology. But and I think, again, Adam, to the point you made, just there's different learning styles. Some people might never watch them because it's like, oh, I know what it is. But for the entry level grades or for the developing people, kind of giving them the support they need, it's, you know, it's really fantastic kind of resource to help them do that in terms of embedding the learning that they want.
Yeah.
What was the kind of initial reaction from teams when they first sort of saw the playbook?
I reference back to my first point about the labels. So the initial reaction was, wow, this thing's massive. I'm not reading all of that. And then actually we were able to explain, well, you don't need to, because we only want you to focus on this area, or here's your labels for your specific work area. And then as we were rolling it out to teams, actually, the pilot, this is where I was explaining before about how important it is to have a pilot team. We're still going through this process of continuous improvement, and we probably could have started that earlier instead of trying to get perfect before it was embedded, as I said. But we split some of the grid review, if you like, from a pilot perspective into the subject matter experts. So, and that went cross-regional. So we had other governance and assurance experts looking at different areas of it to make sure they all agreed with it, and sense checking it and doing assurances, etc. But in general, everyone really likes the idea of it. Compliance is always an issue, getting people to change behaviors, and that's nothing to do with the tool itself. It's just something for people to be aware of when you embark on these journeys, is you have to hold people's hands and walk them into the process, and so they understand it's actually beneficial, and it helps you, and it saves time, etc. So all those usual challenges of behavioral change. We don't like change, but naturally as humans, but you have to slowly embed that and do that way.
Yeah, we can. One of our other clients came up with a great phrase. It's on the recent podcast, but their view is the playbook, it's kind of compliance by stealth.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, you know, I'm not, if I have to tell everyone, oh, you've got to fill in these checklists or fill in this document, have this approved, it's kind of great, but that's just purely the kind of compliance angle. And what we're trying to say is, well, look, if you want, normally what we find in most organizations, the first line of defense, like the process that how you want them to work, how you want to follow, it's not really well articulated. And again, to the point, it's not really universally understood. So when it comes to kind of compliance, people will kind of, oh, well, there's loads of third party, you know, we need independence, we need other functions to check this, we need more checklists. And kind of you can become kind of quite weighed down by the fact, really, the fundamental why you've got so much of that in your organization is probably normally fundamentally a failing of the fact that you haven't really clearly communicated to people what is the process and how to do it. And I think that's the bit we're trying to shift, is you'll always have compliance, you'll always have checklists, but ideally what you want to make sure of is that, you know, your lines 1, 2, and 3 of defense are quite balanced, because if 1 fails, 2 and 3 have to compensate, and really we're just trying to kind of redistribute and make sure that the kind of they are balanced, effective lines of defense, rather than kind of compensating for the fundamental failure of one.
Yeah, I think one of the strengths that the teams really did like, and this was part of the, I guess, landing the system well, is that once we explained it isn't a duplication, the system isn't a duplication of other processes that sit outside of it, it's in replace of. So they weren't aware that when you go through the tick list or you upload completed documents, which are requirements for the stage gates as you move through, they were saying, well, if I do governance and assurance here, I still have to do it in the other process. And they were quite pleased to say, well, no, actually, you can use this. And then we can see from a governance and assurance perspective what you've uploaded, the quality of what you've uploaded, and the fact that you've got all those prerequisites in order before you move to the next stage. Their attitudes then change slightly, because they think, wow, well then this is really, I come to one place to either find out how to do something or to show proof I've done it.
Yeah, I think that's the bit, take any kind of IMS or QMS system that you're trying to introduce. I think it's fundamentally we've got to find a smart way of making it more valuable for the user to do. So the kind of, yes, the knowledge, the process, the single source of truth is encouraging kind of adoption and compliance, because they get more value from it than just, it's another system I have to go to kind of tick a box. Or your point you made, I can point someone to it. I don't have to over explain myself. I've explained how to do this probably 50 or 100 times in the last couple of weeks. And actually what we're trying to help as well, no, look, signpost people, you just need to go and look at if you need any support, there's 3 people that you can go and interact with. And yeah, I think that's also kind of avoiding the risk of either under delegation, you get so frustrated you just do it yourself, but also just to manage that more senior level, middle management more time back, because you've kind of codified ways of working to a better standard. I suppose then kind of outcomes and lessons. I don't know, for organizations kind of facing a similar challenge, what would you say kind of key lessons would be?
Yeah, so I'd say the lessons are, if you're toying with the idea of doing it, do it, because you don't have to have all your documents in the perfect place. You don't have to have everything mapped out before you embark on this journey, etc. So do it. And I guess my lessons learned would be, get something that works as a skeleton and try and get that embedded with a pilot project or a test project or a pilot team as soon as possible. And that process in itself will be really, really helpful. Even if you weren't ever going to use this software again, just to put that as a hypothetical example, just going through that process, this is a genuine lessons learned, you will see the gaps, the holes in most of your processes. So it's a benefit to even go through that process, because you get so much knowledge back to say, well, actually there's a hole there, that doesn't quite work, you need a training video there, how would people know how to find that, etc., etc., etc. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you are thinking about it but you're thinking, well, we need to spend a good few years actually getting our procedures up to scratch, I'd say no. I'd say do it, and then that will pay dividends by doing the process itself.
Yeah, Adam, I have that kind of question at every kind of person I speak to about interest in MetaGrid. They're all like, we haven't written everything down. I'm like, I know you haven't. And no, I think the reality is no one has, and there are gaps. And to disappear and say, oh, well, we're going to write it all down, it's going to be perfect, just doesn't. It never happens. To your point, it's kind of, the faster that you can get something built that's to a level of, to a good level of quality, but out there and getting feedback, that will be far more valuable to people, in a delivery environment, than it will be to hear about another project, about another massive PDF, or about another massive SharePoint build to come back and go, oh yeah, it's all done. There is a bit I find with similar, most organizations, is the ways of working are done like somebody disappears, writes it all down and goes, ta-da, by the way, it's now in this PDF, and everyone gets excited about this new PDF or this new SharePoint site, but then a couple of months later, it's kind of, you're back to the same scenario what you're in. It's kind of like, things have moved on, it wasn't great, it wasn't engaged, we didn't know all the information, we're getting all that feedback, so it tends to be quite a dry product, and then eventually it just becomes a kind of another piece of shelfware that easily ignored,
you definitely see that with different stakeholders involved. So actually it's a benefit to get things wrong in the first place when you're designing it, because the stakeholders will reach out who are reviewing it and helping you, and they will say, oh, you've used the wrong document, or you've used an old procedure, and you can say, interesting, well, that's the one on the SharePoint, so where's your new one? And you can say, it's actually a really healthy process to go through, I think, to look at the whole, if you're working in a work area, or maybe you're in a small business, to see everything holistically in one place. You'll be surprised how much duplication of information there is, or broken links, or old things that aren't connected anymore. So I think it's a kind of win-win situation, because for the departments that are involved in governance and assurance and making sure there's sound and proficient ways of working, etc., this is a piece of software that enables you to basically design that and see the gaps, etc. The challenges, I guess, are embedment. As I said before, that's always a challenge of changing the ways of working, and that'll be a continued thing that you have to put some time and effort into land properly. But that's not a reflection on the tool. The tool works. It's getting people to use it and change their ways of working that they may have done for maybe 5 or 10 years prior to that. So you have to have some strategy around that and go on a journey to do that. But and that would probably be part of the lessons learned, is to really think about your work culture, the behaviors. How are you going to support people to change to a different system? How are you going to promote this? How are you going to recheck in with people to see how they're getting on with it? All of that stuff really needs to be mapped out as well as an embedment process.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, once you've got it, it's kind of how do you reinforce it? And that's the, you know, I think there's the change journey. People get excited about the playbook. They can kind of see it coming. It's quite quick. So there isn't really a lag between, oh, we've talked about it, and then, you know, 6 to 8 weeks later, it's kind of, it's much more visible. But yeah, it comes down to the basics, which is, okay, it's there and it's live. People are excited about it, but you have to kind of reinforce it that, you know, you've got to use it. You know, it's got to be, we're tracking it. We're monitoring your use on different projects, that kind of reinforcement. And again, embedding it into kind of the learning experience as well for people. It's kind of, how does HR or learning development support it? But yeah, you kind of have to reinforce it. Otherwise you just fall into the same trap, which is, we've got, you know, we're just writing stuff down.
There was one funny lessons learned, which I would probably share because it's quite humorous, but there was this idea in a few work areas where you'd have to explain to people that this system isn't a system for snooping on people if they haven't done the right thing. And, you know, there's always that mistrust when you embed something that they think, this is going to be looking at what I haven't done instead of what it can help me with. And so that was another thing, is to just explain to people that actually, yes, whilst it does have functions for governance and assurance to check that process and procedures being followed, it's there as a benefit and a help, not so people can, you know, look from behind the scenes and keep checking on you and doing what you're doing. So we did find there was a, you know, that's a change in culture and change in behavior. You have to say, we're doing this to help, not to have additional metrics to look at of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I summarized it to some clients before, which is when you've mapped out some of the playbooks we built are quite large. I mean, like there's the renewable, I've got a renewable asset playbook, builds an offshore wind farm. And when you look at all the kind of deliverables across all of the different functions, it's, you know, it's massive. I mean, yes, it has to be filtered to kind of show people the different perspectives and viewpoints that they're interested in. But I'd struggle, any human, to try and mentally remember and build that picture in their head about, okay, what do we have to do in this stage across all the different functions, and kind of remember it. But yet, funny enough, we still ask them, you know, they have to kind of build that cognitively in their mind. So, you know, all we're trying to do is help them and be like, oh yeah, I forgot about X and I forgot about Y, because, you know, we're humans, we're much more visual, than the visual management side of things actually helps them with that and kind of reduce the kind of complexity in their head that they're trying to build that picture.
Yeah, totally. I think coming back to the video explainers, I think they're a great function, because we all have days where we feel, you know, I think you said the word cognitive overload. Like, we have days like that where you've only got 15-20 minutes to spend on a task and you're trying to fly through things, and we all have that. And so the video explainers, even if you're an experienced practitioner, contractual practitioner, they're great to just be able to put on whilst you kind of get your thoughts in a row. Right, yeah, okay, I know what I'm doing, and then off I go, as an aid memoir, really. Yeah,
I think it comes up a few times I've had where we don't normally, there's maybe a deliverable that you only do in a really, like, I haven't done one in about 4 years, and it's nice to be like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. And I think that's the bit as well. It's like, we're not trying to say you have to remember everything, you know, but actually at some point, oh, it's just a little pointer. Yeah, I haven't done one of those types of contract or one of those documents for a long time. There it is, and it's kind of just building their confidence. Cool. Okay, well, thank you. I suppose now, just as we open the floor, just if anyone has any questions, just if you want to put some questions for either myself or Adam, and give you sort of 10 minutes. You can either do it in the chat or in the questions section. Cool. So please just post a question. If not, I'll just give you a quick update of other things that we're doing, but I'll pause for any kind of questions that come in. So next month's Grid Talk is on the 28th of May at 1 p.m. It's quite an interesting one. So start of last year, we did a new sort of initiative, what we call Smarter Ways of Working, to close the gap. So what we are looking to do is we have just released this for closed beta. So there's two new kind of things. So obviously, how could we help people actually do the work is a kind of core focus. And it's really trying to help you kind of improve productivity and efficiency. So there's two core things that are in closed beta with clients. So one is AI document drafting. So as in MethodGrid, you'll have all of your templates for all your deliverables. What this does is it opens up your template, reads all the different sections, and then it kind of works with you to complete each section and looks at either information in the playbook or other data sources to help you get the first draft. So that's the first one. And the second one is on the flip side is what we call AI quality assurance. So when you upload evidence to your playbook, that you've done that task or you've completed that deliverable, it will do a quick quality check to make sure that what you've uploaded meets the quality criteria. Now, obviously, we've been building this over the last maybe 4 to 5 months. It's now kind of in closed beta with a number of clients. So May's Grid Talk is just giving you a bit of a demo just to show you how they work with a few live examples. I think we've got a couple of the network rail paste templates built in there. Adam, we might have a go with some of the other contractual ones to bring it to life. But so that's May. Just to give you an update, I think yeah, if you look at the chat, that invite's just gone out. So yeah, please come along because we'll actually show you the product working in the beta account. And then if you're interested and would like to try and trial it with your clients, then please give me a shout. The other piece that we're doing across since February, yeah, we're 3 months in, is we're now focusing on something called the UK Project Delivery Playbook. I'll just make this a bit bigger so everyone can see it. So each year we normally do one industry research project. And this year we've chosen to take all of the government project delivery standards, the project route map, the green book, the gate review process, the functional standard. I think we may, Adam, we might incorporate the sourcing playbook as well and the standards for procurement as well, because every project we undertake normally involves some form of procurement. And what we're doing is we are translating all of that content into what we call the UK Project Delivery Playbook. So a standard playbook that any government department, government organisation can take as an out-of-the-box template that will have all of the kind of stages, all the different themes, all the gateways, and all the deliverables that are required. Now, it's mainly being built as a template because we recognise it'll be a template in the platform, but every government department, every government organisation is going to want to be able to tailor it and right size it. So we've done a couple of podcasts. First one was just about the concept, which goes through it, and the one I think we're about to release just talks about how we've translated the stages, themes, and shows a kind of what an element would look like. Oh, there's a couple of questions come in. Are we including the Orange Book, Rab? No, but I don't think it's made the scope, but very happy to have a look at the Orange Book. Again, we'll just add it to the source library, but I'll have a look at that and discuss that with the team. And then Murray, how did you embed the commercial contract RACI within Navigate, and was this linked to any automated workflows for review and approval? Adam, do you want to pick up that question?
Yeah. So it wasn't linked. It isn't linked to any automated workflows for review or approval because we use contract administration software for our notifications, etc. But what we did do is within the playbook is it's very clear by there are RACIs in each element and each step that say, for want of a better word, unless you're the named project manager in the contract or you're the supervisor, to use NEC terminology, you cannot do this process. this process you can do if you're a designated project engineer or engineer, but you can't do this one. So there's an element of contractual compliance through the whole playbook to say who named individuals in the contract can do what and who those that can't. So there's that stage gate there. And then the second part of it would be using contractual software like CMAR, etc. That's what we use for actual formal notification.
Yeah, we find, I think I've done a few playbooks, and there's more than, it depends on what side you are. If you're on the kind of professional, if you're on the kind of a subcontractor, they'll go in and say, oh, well, we need to fill in CMAR, and then we need to fill in this other system, and there's like 3 or 4 systems in terms that they have to fill in to kind of get that contractual, I don't know, that contract variation raised. And that's the bit I think where the playbook is useful, is like, this isn't just like one system that you have to fill in, guys. There's multiple different systems needed in order to get it raised and approved through the process. Okay, so yeah, so please sign up for the podcast and give that a watch. I think they've put that in chat, but we're doing an update on that every month. May's update for the UK project delivery playbook is we're using template dynamics to see if we can get it to produce strategic outline business cases. Sort of, yeah, as everyone tells us, most projects don't write good business cases, so we're going to try and see if we can use AI to work with the government's templates for business cases and get it to work with us to produce it. So that'll be, I think, in May's update. And then for those, we are at the APM conference on Wednesday and Thursday, so please come over and say hello. I think myself and Luke will be there, so if you're interested in having a look at the playbook and you're at the APM conference, yeah, pop over. It'd be great to see you. And that is us for this grid talk. So, you know, there are a few resources on our website. So there's the process to playbook white paper, or if you're more focused on building project delivery playbooks, then there's the building world-class project delivery methods and playbooks that are available on our website. Adam, massive thank you. Yeah, thanks for your time. That was really, really good. And yeah, for anyone, yeah, please follow us on LinkedIn and connect with us. That'd be fantastic. Cheers. Have a great week.
Thank you. Thanks.